How's it going, everybody? My name's Warner Fields with Fields of Profit, and today I'm joined by my friend Soros, who's actually a massive arbitrage seller. I think he's done 8 figures doing online arbitrage, retail arbitrage, kind of showing what's possible. So I've got him here to be talking about how he got into it and then some high-level information towards the end. So if you want to kind of just jump into it with us, maybe introduce yourself to the community, we can just kind of see where it goes from there.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, Warner.
Yeah. So where are you at in your Amazon business right now? Kind of what are you guys up to kind of sales-wise? Just kind of introduce your business.
Actually, this has been kind of a restructuring year. I had kind of I think we maxed out at like 11 million rolling 30 day, and that was too large. We're actually down to about a $7 million store, and that's kind of the size we want to keep it next year. And well, I can kind of get into why, but let's just say that I started out by myself, going to stores like a lot of you guys, and it got like businesses can get exponential fast. And we were in a rising tide market, and I would say I was getting a little ahead of myself last year, and we grew to 28 employees in about 2 years. And really, I pumped the brakes this year, and we downsized to about 12 employees, and I can talk about how that all went. But that's where we're at right now. I'm really happy with, again, it was kind of a restructuring year. We didn't make quite as much as we did in 2021, but I feel like we are super primed for 2023. We've kind of gotten more nimble, and we're ready for, I don't expect a recession next year, but if things get harder, we're much more of like a pinpoint nimble company.
Right.
Whereas we got to the point where we were like, this is all making money. Let's just buy everything under the sun. Just keep on buying and fix it later. And that attitude isn't going to work long term.
Right. Yeah. I think we got into a similar pattern like a few months ago where it's like, we got money, let's spend it. And now it's kind of a refining process. We're spending less money, but more profitably. I'm sure that's kind of the process you're going through as well there. But yeah, we can kind of step back a little bit before we get into the millions there. For a lot of the guys and girls at home are, they're just getting started. Maybe they're doing $1,000 a month in sales. What did those early days look for you? How'd you get into Amazon?
So I got into Amazon because I was trading for a couple years, and it was just a little up and down, and I had a baby on the way, and it was just going to be too emotionally taxing for my family, and I needed to get serious. And luckily my wife introduced me to a mentor that knew Amazon, and I was super skeptical because I think my first thoughts were like, how has this not been figured out by big companies? It's crazy my attitude then compared to how I look at it now, which is like, there's literally endless opportunities out there and none of this is figured out. Amazon is the best teacher of that, because like when you start, you're trying to find a product and you can't find any products. You're like, you have this filter where you're like, there can't possibly be anything here. And then a month or two, you get your first product, and you get a couple more, and then you get a couple more. And then like a month or 2 or 3 in, suddenly you have the confidence that you can be dropped into any store or go online and you're going to come out with profitable product. And the power that kind of gives you is you're like, wait a second, this is just Amazon, but business in general, everything in life in general works this way. The reason we just think opportunities are so hard is because we've been told business is hard, whatever, and we just didn't spend the time. But it just, a matter of plugging away, and suddenly that veil gets lifted from you and you're like, wow, there's tons of opportunities here. What can we do?
Yeah, 100%. It's funny to talk to like brand new sellers who are like, oh, there's no opportunity. And then you go talk to higher and higher level sellers, like, bro, there's too much. I got to get it before everybody else gets it. Like, even then, like there's so much out there. So yeah, in those early days, like what were those first couple of opportunities? Like what did you gravitate towards kind of early on?
Okay, I was a slow starter. Like I see people running it up in the first month, but I was like, what was taking me so long? I started in Q4 2019, so a little over 3 years ago. And I was starting at Marshall's, Costco, starting like the kitchen aisle, and Marshall's finding like a spatula, like this can make $3. And I'm like, man, how's this ever going to be profitable business?
Do you remember the first item?
The first item that sold was a Docker's shoe. The first item I bought a lot of was like a Costco Cabbage Patch doll.
Nice.
I was super excited about it, but ended up like breaking even, maybe losing a little. But yeah, I remember that first shoe, then these like flannel shirts at Costco that started selling really well. But I had to wait a long time because it was Q4 and shipping speeds were so slow. It took me 2-3 months to get my first sale. I started maybe in August, and I got my first sale late November. And then I had a 15K month of December.
You're saying that like 15K was a slow start. My third month was $1,000. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think I would have had the smaller months if shipping speeds weren't so slow. But I finally got in, and it was Christmas. So
I gotcha.
But yeah, you get to the store, and when I was talking about the spatulas, I remember being in Marshall's and being like, how the hell could this be profitable? And I thought the misconception was you're going deep. You need to find products that are going to be like a gold mine that you can pump all year. You get 1,000 spatulas and buy them, but that's way off. Everybody knows wide, not deep. If you're a new seller, is the way to go. And I still go wide, not deep. So the misconception was, all right, this is a $3 spatula. What's even the point? $3 profit spatula. What's the point of even doing this? Well, it's out of Marshall's. There's 10 to 20. I was in Miami. We're maybe 20 Marshall's in a 30-mile radius. And if I could find like 5 products that made $3 to $10 there, well, I got 10 to 20 Marshall's to pick them up. So thinking a little bit bigger, yes, I'm just starting out. I'm just learning right here. I'm getting products, sending them in. I just want to see how they sell, etc. It's not about making money at first. You can always scale up, which you could have an employee just driving around to all the Marshalls and picking up that profitable unit. So thinking bigger. It's hard in the beginning because you want to make money so fast, but really it's just about getting your hands dirty and getting products into the store, seeing how they're priced, and then getting back out to the store and getting better at sourcing.
Yeah. Do you still recommend doing RA over OA for a brand new seller?
I do. I haven't done RA in a little bit, but the only reason for that is because OA is just easier for me to manage a large team. We had a very successful RA business. It was higher profits than I make now. And I kind of miss it, to be honest. But the thing is, I'm always trying to focus on being the best at one thing. And when we had RA, OA, and wholesale, every time I kind of spread, I come back to like, all right, what can we get good at one thing? And yeah, 100%. I like RA for new sellers because first of all, it's just more fun getting out to the store. You move your body, pick up a product. You're not just sitting there clicking. So that's nice. But also you may have a really good geographical advantage. You don't have a lot of competitors in your area. Possibly you might have a few stores that are just endlessly profitable and no one else in the country is there. That happens all the time. Like I remember in pool season, like the Canadians, like they just crushed pools because the Walmarts were getting tons of pools and they just way less people at these Walmart. There's all these like inefficiencies all over the globe and all the time and in inventory businesses. So I guess the drawback to RA is once you're growing, you got to have American employees shop, which are expensive and kind of hard to keep compared to a foreign employee that you can, if you pay them $5, $6, $7 an hour, you're making their life and you can raise them up even higher than that.
And they work super hard doing it. And
100%. And they're grateful. And my top guy's making $18 an hour, and that's probably like a $500,000 a year job.
That's crazy.
I can't take care of an American like that. But when starting, you could run up a $5 million RA business on your own with a prep center. You'd have to grind, but it's definitely doable.
That would be a lot of work, but it's super possible. People are like, to hit 6 figures, I'm going to need a VA and a prep center and all that kind of stuff. It's like, no, not even close.
The prep center is probably worth it, pretty early, but you
frees
can
up
do it.
Time,
I could break down that math. It's not that much buying. Like a $5 million store is $2 million in buys a year divided by 12. So that's 166,000 in buys a month. If you went, that's a good amount. That's like 8,000 a trip, 20 trips a month. That's a lot.
That's a lot of RA.
On your own, you'd be out a lot. But let's say a $3 million store. That's doable. Only on your own with the prep center.
Somebody DM me if you're doing that. I'll get you on the show next. That would be incredible for sure. But so kind of finding that early success, starting to do some RA, that kind of stuff. Within that kind of growth period, what was the moment where you knew Amazon can be a legitimate income? This is serious. What was that moment for you?
Yeah, I remember it pretty good. So it wasn't that December when we had the 15,000 in sales. That was exciting. But I would say January, February, so around 4 or 5 months in, which could be 2 to 3 months in for you because, I was a slow starter. I found just a couple really good sources at the outlets. And every time I showed up, I was getting just solid profit, thousands of dollars worth of profit. And, it's coming in and the math just checks out. I'm buying shoes for $27 and they're selling for $60. And the sales ranks were super fast. I wasn't accumulating a bunch of dud inventory. It just got really clear that the math checked out. And that's when I was like, all right, it's time to turn on the money switch, which I just went and just opened up every 0% APR credit card I could. I started with a good amount of capital. I got to do this full time from the start with a mentor, but I also had good credit. So I just was able to open up a bunch of credit cards to really put me on the map. And
get I mean, once you're super, super confident in what you're doing, you might as well, if you got a system, it's working, all that kind of stuff. So kind of doing the RA business, what was the reason for the transition to OA? I know you talk about saving time, that kind of stuff. And what did the early days of OA look like for you?
So let me see if I can remember the progression. It wasn't totally on purpose because my mentor was an RA guy. One of my new theories with business is don't even do it if you don't have a mentor or if you don't have a course or a group that literally has the blueprint. Don't just go do it. You can find it online, but that's a lot of work. I need the focused work or a mentor telling me how to do it. So that's why I was like, I could do RA forever. But I hired my first VA off of Upwork, got really lucky. He was really good. I didn't know how to hire back then.
Yeah, getting a good VA off Upwork on the first try, that is lucky.
It was very lucky. And all his job was to help me with an Excel task when I would drop stuff off to a prep center just to give them a good document of what we gave them. So he did that for a month or two. That's all he did, just an hour or two a day. Every time I dropped off, he'd give me this Excel. And then I'd say around month 7, 8, around when Arbitrage Ops was starting our group, I met a guy that was super good at OA on Twitter. And he gave me a call and just kind of got me dreaming about OA. That it wasn't like I had it in my head that it was so hard because my mentor said it's more competition, which is true. It's amazing. Sometimes you get those limiting beliefs and you like, at that point, I had probably told 1,000 people that I don't do online arbitrage because it's more competitive. So you can see that just becomes like a reality in my head that I don't actually know the answer. So a guy kind of told me about it. He's like, it's the same thing. You just got to grind it out online. What about checkouts? What about this? Yeah, you'll figure it out. It's the same thing. It's just, yes, more competition, but there's benefits as well because of, I guess, what we'll talk about once we get into the management of it. So then I took that VA and me and him together would always be on video calls trying to figure out OA, trying to figure out, profitable products, trying to figure out how to get through checkouts, kind of an art sometimes, how to like get your stuff actually checked out. And I remember a couple months of depressing period not being able to figure it out. Everything was canceling, couldn't find that many profitable products. And it was just a grind. And eventually we started finding some and started figuring out how to check out. And those periods, sometimes you get like just giant gains in something. Like we created like a proprietary process on how he would basically log into my computers. Sites thought we were buying from the US, the Philippines was throwing it off. I think I'm getting a little too in the weeds here, but basically that's how the OA started. It was just me and him. Then we hired another kid off of Twitter that was begging for money. I was like, dude, just put him to work for us. He's now my top buyer.
Well, there you go. It worked out.
He's a charity case, and now he's my top buyer. So it was us three for a while, and then I hired an RA person to start shopping. And I can't remember the next part, but we just started like, once we got good at online sourcing, we just started hiring like crazy.
Yes. Yep.
Just need more leads, more people buying. And then it got to the stage where you had all these other people buying, and then me and John, the first VA, reviewing their buys. Now we started making like a real company structure. And if you can imagine, that structure is pretty hard to replicate in RA. RA, you teach someone how to buy, you buy it, and then you review their work kind of after.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never thought about it that way because RA like feels riskier and all that kind of stuff. But when you're like outsourcing and like people are going out and spending your money, like you can't have anyone give the approval. Like, what are they going to do? Send you a text with like the screenshot of the product or like, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, there's ways to do it. Like, I had people on WhatsApp sending us stuff and we would check it and stuff. But you do have to, you want to grow an RA business, you eventually have to let go of control and let them make that buy. You can review them right away that day and tell them what's wrong. It is doable, but OA kind of gives you that control right away.
Yeah. So when you were kind of doing OA, I know a lot of guys, watching, maybe they're doing decent sales. Like when was the point where you're like, all right, it's time. I'm ready to hire a virtual assistant. Like when was that point for you?
Well, again, it was a natural. I hired a virtual assistant because I needed a low value. When I say low value, a task that doesn't like add value. Yep. So sourcing is our highest value task. It literally is the only thing why we're making money on Amazon. We're finding something cheap. Most of the other Amazon processes like prep, actually doing the checkout of the product, stuff like this Excel task I was talking about, it doesn't add money. So naturally, I think the prep center is the number one low value task to just, if you're prepping 20 hours a week and you can get that outsourced, that's number one. Number two, that Excel task, for example, for me was one. So that's how I got the VA, because I just needed a low value task done. I think that's a good time for people to start looking for a VA because you still want to be doing your own sourcing for as long as possible.
It's way more valuable than putting stickers on things. Too many people get virtual assistants before they get the prep center. It's like sourcing is the most important thing you can do. And then what you're doing when you get a virtual assistant before a prep center is you basically end up working for your VA because your VA is finding you stuff, sending it to you, and then you're doing the VA's work basically. Yeah. So I think it's funny when people kind of reverse it a little bit there. But yeah, kind of getting the prep center first is definitely the way.
People want to get these VAs fast, and any hire you make or any outsourced thing you do, you better know it in and out before you do it. And sourcing, like I said, like we know, is the highest value activity. You want to spend a year sourcing if possible. You don't want to spend 1 month sourcing and then hire someone to source for you. How are you going to review their work? How are you going to know the expectation that this person can actually find freaking 15,000 a day on OA? If you do it yourself and can teach them that model, then you can hold them to that expectation. So that works in every part of business. It's the worst when you're trying to manage someone and you don't know the task fully. You're like, I think they should be able to do this well. I get this question all the time from people. Hey, how much should my VA be sourcing a day? I'm like, how much can you source a day? That's usually your answer.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so kind of, getting the virtual assistant team kind of building. What was the team looking like? And, kind of how long did it take you to hit that 7-figure mark with OA?
Man, I need to make a calendar for the 7-figure, I need to make a calendar on like when the deployment went up. But no, my first year we did 1.2 million or something like that. And that was like 95% RA. So around that 8-month mark when OA was picking up, it was still kind of like exploratory. I'd say.
Cool.
So we finished that year. When I say first year, we had those first 3 months of 2019 or 4 months. And then the first full year, finished at I think 1.2 or 1.3 million. And that was 95% RA. But the OA business was picking up at the end of the year. I remember finding lots of deals OA going into Christmas, prepping myself for 2021. So when we were wrapping up a $1.3 million year, well, I think we were already operating as a $3-4 million business because we were doing like 400,000, 300,000, 400,000 a month. And it's still, we were doing that with like a couple people. Like we were doing that. And really, there's not a rush to grow huge because I like downsizing. I want my company to be even smaller. I like having very smart people in a room that you can put your heads together, figure something out. Once you get past 7, 8 employees, you have to make systems and procedures and everything becomes this like conveyor belt and you lose a lot of like intelligence used to search for products. And I feel like that's what happened when we got too big. Okay. So after that year, operating as a $3 or $4 million store, 300, 400,000 a month, I think at that time we were bringing on more and more people to help us with their sourcing. And my second year goal was originally 4 million and we were like, screw it, let's make it 10 million because that's only like double the output of what we're doing right now and maybe a little bit of wholesale and on top and we'll get there. Man, that period is just like a freaking blur at the moment.
I mean, I assume when you're scaling like that, you're not doing much besides scaling it at all.
I mean, the primary takeaway is things happen naturally. So the primary takeaway, when you get your first VA, you spend every waking moment with that VA. Like get him thinking exactly like you. Your first couple VAs, you want them to literally just think and act like you, take on, all your skills, all the things that you know about the company. And with 2 VAs, like right now we have 4 full-time sourcing VAs and they're buying $250,000 a month.
Yeah, that's impressive.
And that's a $7 million company because they've been with me for 2 years. And we got up to like 12 sourcing VAs and we were buying about the same, a little bit more and way worse quality.
Yeah,
so
we kind of doing something similar, kind of shrinking the team a little bit. We're down to 6 who spend like 150 a month. So not quite at that caliber yet, but yeah, I'm proud of that kind of
100%. And we got to see, I mean, that was recent buying that much and we have to like really drill in and make sure we didn't buy anything. Because quality over quantity, 100%. I would much rather be $4 million store making 40,000 a month than like a $10 million store making 50,000 a month, 60,000 a month, and inventory just everywhere. Like when you get super big, the tracking just becomes like that much harder.
Especially when you're going wide. I'm sure you ran into the same headache where you look back at your prep center sheet, it's like, whoa, there's like $20,000 missing, and then you got to go track it down. And so definitely learned the lesson on that. Did you have a realization on that where it's like, oh, we got to be on top of this better?
Yeah, it was a joke. So we thought we were making so much money because first of all, I was discounting how much dud inventory was accumulating with, like we were buying 500,000 a month at one point. My theory was all of that stuff tracking, let's just treat it as cost of doing business. We'll lose stuff, but overall, since we're spending the money sourcing, we're going to make more on the sourcing. Well, that actually may have worked for a short period when, let's say, all the market conditions are in our favor. Like COVID was happening. Yeah, there were a lot of just like trending products that you just couldn't get enough of. But then when the market got a little harder and we're sloppy, not only were we buying poor products, we weren't tracking any of them. So the store there's so many vector areas that the product can get lost. You buy it and the store might not ship it. The store might charge you more than they say they were going to charge you. This has actually happened before. I bought a 90% discounted set of products for $1,000 on DSW. And a little email came through that my order was updated and it removed the discount. So it was $10,000. They were knowingly doing that and waiting for customers to find out and call them.
That's crazy. I've seen do that before as well, charging more than you paid. So be on the lookout for that.
So now we have a team that are like full-time tracking every piece of inventory. But from the store, they could lose it or charge you too much. On the way to the prep center, it could get lost. At the prep center, it could get stolen or lost. On the way to Amazon, it could get lost. At Amazon, God knows what happens in those warehouses. Like sometimes they reimburse you, sometimes they don't. So you do your best at every stage in the process to track it. And, in the beginning, it might be cost of doing business for you. You got to evaluate where you should put your time. If you're a 1 or 2 person shop, you got to focus on sourcing. That's the most important part of growing in the beginning. But then once you start to get to a 7-figure store, it's a material amount if you're not tracking that really hits your bottom line if things are starting to get lost.
Yeah. So you have a team to that? Is that one guy? What does that look like? Because I don't have that. That's something I need to implement is kind of one person. I'm still doing a lot of the auditing.
Yeah. Let me try to, I think we have too many in that department, but let me try to give you, we have a 12-person team right now. We have basically the chief operating officer. She's just overseeing everything. 4 sourcers. The COO is also the purchasing manager. like she's reviewing everything, which we don't really want that, but that's just how we got to do it right now.
Yeah, we're set up the same way. They know the most about like the leads. Like it just makes sense. Yeah.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard. You got to have your best people. And it's also tough making that transition where you're like, this person might not get to source as much and they're our best sourcer. So then we have 3 people in what we call warehouse. One of them does checkouts. So some people do this, some people don't. We like it this way where our sources are sourcing, but once they've figured it out what they want to buy, we have a checkout person actually go in and buy it. So that takes away some of the low value time so they can get back to source. So we have a checkout person. We have a warehouse comms person that's constantly talking. This one might be like the luxury item, but constantly talking to the prep centers and our own tracking and trying to figure out where everything is. Like they need help, they need questions with prep. She's always on WhatsApp. And then we have like our head warehouse person that's just like in charge of all the audits. So we have 3, but I think that entire department can be done in 2 or 1, depending on your size. Somebody in charge of our eBay and Mercari store, and then we have someone in charge of account health. So I think that should add up to about.
Cool. Yeah. So what are some things that you learned at the 8-figure scale that you might not see at 6 and 7 figures?
Well, I think I mentioned some of them, and that is quality over quantity, and like growth just for the sake of growth, like is not necessarily worth it. One of the quotes I really like, Michael Saylor was on Kobe's podcast and he finished it with one thought that was like, okay, if you can build it or buy it, can you maintain it? And then if you can maintain it, can you enjoy it? And my early stage, like $3 to $4 million store, we built it and we were able to maintain it and we were able to enjoy it. But when we got to the $10 million store, we could barely maintain it and we definitely couldn't enjoy it. So
sure, yeah.
When you can't enjoy it, it's not just like, yeah, this is fun. It's like, I no longer have any bandwidth to do anything else but try to plug holes and figure out how to like keep this company running. So that's one thing I learned. I mean, I learned the tracking. You know, I'm a bull in a china shop, do things now, fix them later. The tracking is something that if you can be a little more mature about that and see it coming, that this is going to be important as you grow, start early.
That's the biggest thing I've learned as you scale is like the things that people say is just cost of business becomes a much larger cost of business when the business is also bigger.
I remember hitting that, you know, over 8 employees or something when it really does become like I created like a corporation and we needed to have procedures and manuals and like all kinds of conveyor belt documents. And, you know, some people are going to be really good at that. My first run at it, I was not good at it. And frankly, I don't even want to be that good at it. If I can run a $5, $6, $7 million store as a super team of like 6, 7 people, we're all in the same chat room. We can all like kind of pull our weight. At 8, 9, 10, 15, 20 people, there's very little responsibility on any one task. Like you can try your best to assign people, but people like are working on their thing and they don't see the company as a whole and they don't feel responsibility for the company's success. They're only responsible for their task. That creates all kinds of like issues. So
what are some things you've done to create that culture?
So this year has been a major like, well, first of all, getting smaller has been good for culture because we're trying to get people talking more. Yeah, this year has been major for culture. One thing is I gave our company an internal name and logo. We're Fire Tiger, and it's no longer just like Soros' Amazon store. So like they get to feel like they're part of a company. You know, we do video games on Fridays. One thing I really like that we've been doing lately is instead of just like monetary bonuses based on how well they're doing and how well they're buying, that really gets boring, honestly. And that's the superstars really like.
It motivates the people who crush, but the people who aren't at the top are like, I'm
exactly.
not gonna
they think they want money. They would probably say, yes, I would love this. But the middle and the lower people, I don't see a huge boost in their performance with monetary bonuses. They would much rather show up to work, know what they're doing, feel respected, and maybe get a prize or something every once in a while. And that has been a super big. And another thing I like to do is give days off. So lately, really had a lot of excitement around our sourcing. And it's because we're like, we've got a mystery prize if you guys hit this. And you know, we give them TVs or we give them a trip to Boracay Island in the Philippines, stuff like that. Yeah. And we give it to anyone in the company, not just the sourcers that did the best job. So like everyone was working together to like make the other people win a prize. So yeah, company video games, stuff like that. Really just making situation. We're in a Discord group together, just like making certain systems where you have to go into the chat and post something and someone has to respond. Like I literally had to force people to get talking and interacting together. I feel like we have a much better atmosphere. Whereas before it was just kind of like everyone in their own room. doing their task, no one talking, nobody sharing ideas.
Yeah, that's definitely some of the stuff I need to implement. We're probably more in the, do in your own room doing your task. You're doing a good job, but I'd love to kind of make it more fun for them and that kind of stuff. That's actually something I was personally wondering about, like incentivizing a sourcing team is really easy, or just sharing profit with them like that. Is that what you guys do? Do you share profit with your sourcers?
Yeah, the way I started was I would pay just an insane amount. People laughed at me how much I gave these guys. You got to be careful though, because you got to make sure you're also penalizing. If you're going to share profit, your profits on Inventory Lab look way better than they are. They look, because all your best stuff's selling first. Well, you're accumulating some slow stuff. So you got to make sure once stuff gets like over 90 days old, you need to like penalize or like write that inventory down for accounting terms and like make some sort of score. Because what happened to me is we looked really good for a long time, but we accumulated a lot of that slow stuff that ended up having to be moved or sold for very cheap. And I was paying based off of the profits without that. So then I got to a point where I was paying them way, way too much when we were needing to downsize a little bit. And I had to cut salaries. I had to cut how we did it and stuff. Most of this year, I wasn't giving a lot of those bonuses. So a good replacement for that, if you're not ready to give those bonuses, is give days off as rewards. Like we were getting $60,000 a week recently in buys by Thursday in the morning. Give them the Thursday and Friday off. I'd be like, what's the difference if you guys get it done in 3.5 days or 5 days? That was another exciting factor that like bonded everybody together.
Yeah, I like that idea. I just noticed when you do a spend-based goal, it incentivizes them to source a bunch of 30-35% ROI stuff that's just super expensive.
The only way this works, you got to have a hardcore reviewer that you meet with a lot and that you trust to like, because the reviewer wants to help them. They're all friends. But you got to have a reviewer that's like a brick wall that like really understands. Like if you can get your reviewer understanding the true numbers of your company and why it's just not going to work long term if they're buying this junk, that's key to if you're going to set a buy goal. You have to have that.
Yeah, I guess just as long as you trust in your manager, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I sit down with mine once a month, kind of all the numbers. Here's what we did this month, like that kind of stuff, kind of giving them a really good idea of why we're doing the things we do. So yeah, very, very similar on that. Yeah, so obviously incentivizing sourcing is pretty easy. You're talking about like prizes and stuff for like your more admin tasks. That's where I've been struggling to figure out how to incentivize people. Like what KPIs are you setting for them?
We're not that good with KPIs. Basically, the only way admin people are getting rewarded right now is based on the sourcers. So like that causes them to all help. Like there's a lot of overlap between those admin. Like they work with the spreadsheets that the sourcers are putting on, so they can like tip off sourcers for good products to look at. I noticed a little bit more of that, but no, I do need to work on some more. I guess like the KPIs we look at primarily in warehouse is like how fast our prep centers are shipping. By the way, that was a major issue we ran into as well in late 2020 when we were buying everything under the sun. We weren't checking if the prep centers were sending it in quickly. So since we weren't checking, we weren't asking, Q4 rolls around, products were sitting in prep centers for 2 months before they were going out. We were going to be the last competitor on the listings. And now, you track your inventory and also you're banging down the door of every prep center. They agreed that things are going to come out every 3 days. Every 3 days, everything should be shipped out. And if they're not, you got to raise your hand. So yeah, that's a KPI for warehouse.
I gotcha. Yeah. We ran the same thing. We use a really small prep, great communication, all that kind of stuff. Like I love mom and pop preps, but we flooded them. Like they were not ready to, we spent like $250,000 in a month and they were not ready for that. And it was like, it ended up taking 3-4 weeks to get stuff out.
I've imploded prep centers as well. I love mom and pop, but yeah, then you got to make sure they're a little ambitious and they can staff because we've destroyed prep centers before. And then the huge ones, you get lost in the mix there. So yeah, you got to find that small, medium size one.
Yeah. So those of you guys watching, before you get those prep centers, like, do you have experience prepping the kinds of items that I sell? Are you able to handle this volume? And like ask them multiple times because they'll say yes. And then you're like, can you seriously handle this? And then they'll give you the real answer. Just like making sure that prep center is good for you. Like at some point they're like a business partner. So it's really important to make sure they're there for you too.
For sure. And yeah, pricing is probably like the third or fourth issue. Like what you said there, you mentioned your prep center is really good at communicating. They should give you like someone that you can talk to at any time on WhatsApp or something like that.
If you're talking to the owner, that's how you know you're that you're at a good size prep center. Yeah. So that's awesome stuff. I want to kind of transition a little bit. What changes have you seen within like the OA RA space within like the last year or two since you started?
I would say, so we really picked up our OA in the COVID years, and that was just a nice rising tide market. Like there were less competition. I think it was sort of a blow off top going in the end of last year. year where lots of people rushed into this just to make a quick buck. And I think this year we've already seen like a good amount of people get sucked out. And I think you're going to see going into next year when people start calculating their profits for 2022, there's going to be a good amount of people that drop off. I think this year was harder than the last 2 years. And I think that's typical with business. You have times where it's like super, super profitable and people rush in. And then you have a couple years where it chills and people drop off. One thing that I've noticed, because I've traded for longer than I've been in Amazon, but it's a similar thing, is bear markets, recession, stuff like that. Those are fantastic for companies. That's when all the major work gets done. And if you have a like slower year, like if this year was slower and maybe if next year is even a little slower, and if you can make money or even break even, like your company is so primed for when the floodgates open again. Once all your competitors kind of get sick of it, if you're already making money, you're just going to make so much money once things get easier again. So I think that's typical business cycles. Yeah, I feel like this year was a little harder. Also, it was harder because we managed our own company poorly, but more competitors on listings this year, and competition is going to continue to increase. But yeah, there will be years where it starts to decrease because not everybody can handle the game anymore.
Yeah. I like that. Something that I try to keep in mind, like as you're growing, you guys at home kind of scaling the companies, is like you're building a company that can find opportunities. You're not looking for that one opportunity, like especially in arbitrage, you're going to run it up on a site, you're going to spend $100,000 in a month, and then never again will they let you spend $1 with them. And then you figure out something new. So everyone with arbitrage and that kind of stuff is hunting for like the magic bullet when you need to be building an organization that can repeatedly find magic bullets.
100%. I talk about that all the time. You're building a buying process. You're not like, you're not finding a gold mine here or two and then you're pissed when they go away. No, that is part of the game. I break down sourcing into like 4 tenets. Now it's hammer your restocks, the things that you know are selling well, see if you can rebuy them. Double down on sites that you know are working really well. If you feel like you have a major cash cow, go after those sites. Then do your standard sourcing. Maybe you have 10, 20 sites you like to shop on, you're there. But make sure you make time, even a few hours a week, for like exploratory sourcing, where you're looking at completely new categories, like looking for like using your brain. And my sources always push back on the days. They're like telling me to source grocery and it's super hard. And yeah, it's super hard because you've never done it before. It's just at the beginning of Amazon again. So those like hours you put into the exploratory, you may not get a lot of products right away, but eventually you're going to land on like a killer new category, a killer new product. And if you just continue to repeat those 4, well, now you have, like what you said, an organization that is constantly looking for new opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. For the guy or girl at home who's, they're getting their Amazon business started, maybe they've got a decently scaled business. What advice would you have for somebody trying to get to the, 7-figure, 8-figure level with arbitrage?
Well, before that level, just make sure, like we said before, you're very good at sourcing. You should be spending so much, like much more time on sourcing than anything else, because that's where your highest value activity in Amazon is. If you're at that point where you're a pretty good sourcer, the first step is a prep center. So if you're already at that level where you have a prep center, you've done 80-90% of the work in setting up your company. To get to the next level, I mean, I never had this issue because I think I'm lazy. Like I love getting rid of control, but you're going to have steps and stages in your company where you have to relinquish some control on certain things. And usually the best things to look at, I talked about how business can kind of naturally turn into these big companies, is maybe timesheet your day and figure out how much time you're spending on low value activities. Maybe prepping an Excel that goes to your prep center, maybe auditing and tracking product, account help, stuff like that. If you already know how to do those things and you're spending 15, 20 hours a week on them, or like, 5 hours here and there, those are the easiest places to start sending VAs to. And sometimes you're going to have to make the leap where you're like, I can't afford this. I can do this myself for free. Why would I pay for someone to go do this? Well, you have to make the leap and have the faith that that newly acquired time is going to go to good things. And it might not right away. But what I always like to do if I'm nervous about spending money for something like this, so say, okay, I've identified 10 hours where I want to hire someone part-time to do this product tracking task that I've been doing myself. I don't want to spend that money. Why would I spend that money? I don't have that much money in the bank. Well, okay, let's hire someone and let's do this for 1 month. Let's see how it goes. You're going to put them on this for 1 month. Let's see how it goes. Now I'm going to acquire 10 hours a week for myself. And, being someone that new business owner, I'm not so sure will I use the time wisely. Let's see how it goes for 1 month and commit to using those 10 hours to, high level stuff, more sourcing, hitting up wholesalers, stuff like that. See where you land at the end of the month. And every time I make this challenge to myself, I'm like, holy crap, those 10 hours, those 40 hours a month went to something huge. We just acquired something huge and this was totally worth it. So that starts to just happen over and over and over again. If you just outsource those 10 hours, what else can you outsource to give yourself more high value time? And some of the best Amazon sellers I know, all they do is just outsource the low value and they're still the sourcer. They're still the head sourcer. I know a guy that runs an 8-figure store. He does all his own sourcing. But every other
That's crazy.
Well, it's crazy, but he probably makes triple the ROI that I make because he's a genius. He knows his stuff in and out. Whereas I'm trying to make a company that's pretty good, that can repeat over time, and I don't have to work very often. He's probably going to beat us over time, but he's got to work 40 hours.
Right. That's not the game I want to play. That's why
it's different people. If you like sourcing, like you're going to have a major advantage if you're your head sourcer than those of us trying to like get out of it.
For sure. Yeah. So kind of wrapping up here, what's your primary goal for 2023?
Let's see. Early goals. I'm not saying all right, our primary goal, we're trying to be a $7 million store with 10% margin. That's just like 700,000 profit. I want to continue working like 4 to 10 hours a week on my store. I want to get aging got a little out of control. I think our over 180-day inventory is like 25%. I want that zero. I want over 90 days should be like 5-10%.
That would be amazing.
I want it in and out. Like we buy for like 1 to 2 months. There's no reason we should be getting the 3-4 months. We should be getting that stuff out at break even or loss and learning from our mistake and improving. So that way I have like a much better handle on my true profits rather than, we booked all this solid profit and we have freaking hundreds of thousands of inventory in 180 days where we really don't know how much we're making. Yes, speed of sale, those profit goals, but I do not really care about hitting those profit goals. I'm more concerned with the speed of sale and keeping our margin up around 10%. Right now we're doing like a repricing. We're really big on repricing. We really neglected that in 2022. We're making like a whole department around it. So somebody because we have 2,500 SKUs. There's a lot of money to be made like pricing properly. So somebody that should be spending almost their entire day doing that. So repricing, sales goals, and then I'm also doing a private label brand on the side. And that's going to be a big goal for 2023. But that's private label is not actually as much, probably a little less work, but it's a little like more like different risk reward. Like we've spent a lot of money already and we haven't.
It's way higher risk, and 1 out of every 2 or 3 you'll hit, or you don't. You lose 5 or 10 grand. It's just got to be a part of the game.
Yeah, God, it's taken us forever just to get a product to market, and then we don't even know if it's going to do well. So
thanks for coming on, sharing some game with the community. If the people at home want to come follow along, see that $7 million goal in 2023, where can they find you?
I think actually the best place to find me is Arbitrage Ops on Twitter or Instagram. We're really starting to put out a lot of content. Yeah, Arbitrage Ops, best place to find me. I've co-founded that group, and that's where I hang out the most.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for coming on. Good to kind of get those 8-figure insights. Appreciate you hopping on. For those of you guys who are watching this video, thanks for sticking around this long. Feel free to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. Let me know if you guys do have any questions, comments in the comment section down below. But I really appreciate all of you guys watching, and I will see you next time.